Imagine Australia in 1932. The land was wide, open, and full of hope, but also trouble. The First World War had ended more than a decade before. Many young men had come home, hoping to start fresh. The government gave them farmland, a reward for their sacrifice. It sounded like a grand idea. But the land was tough, the weather was harsher, and the world was stuck in the Great Depression. These new farmers, called soldier settlers, soon learned that farming in Australia wasn't easy. The soil was thin and dry. Rain was more a rumor than a promise. Wheat crops struggled. Money was tight. Still, the farmers plowed on, dreaming of golden fields and full barns. But as their crops grew, they weren't the only ones watching the fields. In this dry, hopeful land, life was a daily battle against nature. Kangaroos hopped by, rabbits nibbled at crops, and dust storms rolled over the horizon. Yet, nothing could have prepared the farmers for their next big enemy. It wasn't a bug, a storm, or even another drought. It was a bird, a very, very big bird. So, Australia in 1932 was a place of dreams. But those dreams were about to come face to beak with a feathery nightmare. And that's where our strange story begins. Every year, as the wheat began to ripen, a new threat appeared on the horizon: emus. Emus are not your average backyard birds. They are taller than most people, can run faster than a horse, and are as stubborn as a shopping cart with a broken wheel. In 1932, about 20,000 of these giant birds decided to march into the farmlands of Western Australia. The emus weren't evil masterminds. They were just hungry. After all, the wheat fields looked like an all-you-can-eat buffet. The birds trampled fences, gobbled seedlings, and left chaos wherever they went. For the struggling farmers, it was the last straw. Their wheat was disappearing, and so was any hope of making money. Tensions grew. The farmers tried everything: scarecrows, fences, even shooting at the birds. But emus weren't easily scared. If one bird ran away, the rest just kept eating. Soon, the wheat fields looked like a battlefield, with the emus as the clear winners. Farmers wrote desperate letters to the government, begging for help. The emu invasion was no joke. The birds moved in big, noisy flocks, kicking up dust and flattening crops. They were like a feathery army, and the humans were losing badly. Something had to be done, and quickly, before the harvest vanished completely. This wasn't just a problem for a few farmers, it became a national embarrassment. Australia, a proud and tough country, was being beaten by birds. It was time to fight back. When desperate farmers asked for help, the government's answer was bold and bizarre: why not send in the army? Soon, Major Meredith and his men packed up 2 machine guns and headed to Western Australia. This was no joke. The soldiers were serious: uniforms, guns, and plenty of bullets. Their mission? Defeat the emu menace and save the wheat. But the emus scattered, ran, and hid. The soldiers missed. The machine guns jammed. The birds dodged and weaved. The stage was set for one of history's strangest wars. The first battle began on November 2nd, 1932. The soldiers spotted a flock of about 50 emus near a dam. They set up their machine gun and fired, but the emus scattered instantly. Only a few birds fell. The rest dashed away like sprinters in feathers. Next, the army mounted a machine gun on a truck to chase the birds. But the truck bounced wildly, and the gunner couldn't aim. The birds seemed to laugh as they vanished into the bush. After thousands of bullets, only a handful of emus were killed. The emus just kept running and eating, unfazed by the chaos. The wheat fields, sadly, had not survived. If the Emu War sounds a bit silly, that's because it was. The newspapers had a field day. Headlines joked about emus outwit army and birds beat soldiers. Cartoonists drew emus wearing medals and generals' hats. The whole country laughed, even as the farmers cried. The army's efforts went down as a classic case of good intentions gone wrong. The soldiers tried their best, but they were no match for the birds' speed and smarts. The machine guns jammed, the trucks got stuck, and the emus always seemed just out of reach. It was a bit like watching a slapstick comedy, only with more feathers and fewer pies. One of the funniest moments happened when the gunner tried firing from the moving truck. The gun bounced so much that he couldn't hit a thing. Meanwhile, the driver had to dodge bushes and holes. The emus ran in zigzags, as if they knew exactly how to escape. The army might have been trained for war, but the emus were born for survival. In the end, the government called off the whole thing. The soldiers packed up their guns and went home. The emus stayed put, munching on wheat and probably telling their chicks stories about the day they beat the humans. The story of the Emu War became a legend, not because the humans won, but because they lost so spectacularly. What can we learn from the Great Emu War? First, never underestimate nature. Emus, with their tiny brains and long legs, outsmarted some of the best-trained soldiers in the country. They showed that being clever isn't always about being the smartest. It can also mean being fast, unpredictable, and stubborn. Second, it's a reminder that big problems sometimes need simple solutions. The Army's machine guns were no match for a bird that refused to stand still. Later, the government tried other ways, like building better fences and offering rewards for emu calls. These worked a bit better. Sometimes old-fashioned methods beat fancy technology. Third, the Emu War teaches us about humility. It's easy to think humans control everything, but sometimes a flock of birds can turn the tables and remind us who really runs the show. It's a humbling and hilarious lesson for anyone who thinks they have all the answers. Finally, the Emu War is a story about the unexpected. No one could have guessed that a few birds would defeat an army. But history is full of surprises. Sometimes the strangest stories are also the most memorable. So, the Emu War lives on, not as a tale of victory, but as a reminder to expect the unexpected. Today, the Great Emu War is remembered with a mix of laughter and disbelief. It's a favorite story for anyone who loves history, animals, or a good joke. Australians tell it to show their sense of humor, and it's even inspired books, songs, and internet memes. The emu, once a farmer's nightmare, is now a national icon, and even appears on Australia's coat of arms. For historians, the Emu War is a lesson in what not to do. For everyone else, it's just a great story. It shows that even the best-laid plans can fall apart, and that sometimes you just have to laugh at your own mistakes. It's a story where the underdog, or underbird, comes out on top. The Emu War also reminds us that nature is wild and unpredictable. You can plan, you can prepare, but sometimes you just can't win against a determined flock of birds. That's both funny and a little bit comforting. The world is still full of surprises. So next time you see an emu, give it a little salute. After all, not every bird can say it defeated an army. And that, in simple words, is how Australia lost a war to its own wildlife, and why the Great Emu War will never be forgotten.